Now Fiddler. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, go Freddie. That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not believe them. Marshall skips away, Marshall's still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast which encourages rugby league sabbaticals focused on brainwashing babies. You found me, Big T, the rugby league podcast version of a pitch hitter. On today's show, we'll be discussing our origin highlights, Rooster retirements, high shots, and how the average fan actually watches NRL. But first, on the batting lineup with me in the Sports Best Friends Studios Stadium tonight is the most level-headed Rooster fan this side of Politis' boardroom. It's Xander Risotto. Welcome, sir.
Good to be here, mate.
And now, do you chase the fastball inside, or do you like the more up and in?
I prefer the more up and in. I like to have the opportunity to go straight to the head.
Right. And with us in the dugout is Manly's most forward thinker this side of the Four Pines Park. Welcome to the plate, Media Watch Mario.
Thank you indeed. I've had quite the weekend.
Well, you also seem like the kind of guy who chased the knuckleball right into the dirt. Am I right about that?
Not knowing exactly what that means, let's say sure.
It's heavy on the baseball terminology early on in this rugby league podcast. I mean, I usually cop a lot for rugby union, but, there are some common themes there at least.
And they're all working class sports of some nature, and they're, brutal and weird. Our fearless team manager, Eamon Brown, is still busily parenting and only has enough time for a quiz show these days. But regardless, Xander, please tell us what happened for you this long weekend.
Look, mostly I just I spent all 3 days of it rewatching the Blues' emphatic victory over the Maroons, to be honest. That and obviously slightly having, palpitations and almost a stroke watching the Roosters give up a 30 to 4 point lead to almost go down to the Titans. But, other than that, nothing terribly eventful.
So a lot of masturbating and then shameful masturbating. Okay, great. And then
absolutely. I think I came blue, actually.
No,
sorry.
No, I enjoyed it. Not that I saw it. That's Mario. How were you masturbating this weekend?
Not so much of that. I had some different things on my mind or on my whatevers over the weekend.
On your search history?
I drove the many hundreds of kilometres with my 8-year-old daughter down the coast on Friday for the intention of going to a concert to see her favourite band, a mob that probably no one's heard of called Teenage Jones, in support of Amy Shark, somebody whom many may have heard of. So they announced this tour months ago, and it was at Kudos Bank Arena. Yep, all good, no worries. But then about 6 weeks ago, Teenage Jones on Facebook announced their own headline act with some randoms supporting them. And that was going to be at the Enmore Theatre. And so I got in my head, Enmore Theatre. So we've spent the night down in Albion Park, just south of Wollongong, if people don't know it. And then that on the Saturday, we've driven up to the Enmore. We've got there with enough time to spare. We've walked around that area a little bit. I bought her some dinner.
No.
Bought her some dinner. I queue up at the front of the Enmore. Curious why there's a sign for Wolf Mother out the front, but think, there must be. I only thought there was one room there, but maybe there's another one. I've only been to the Enmore once, so I might have been misremembering. Yeah. Oops. They informed me that no, Amy Shark is playing at Kudos Bank Arena. I, of course, swore very loudly, which shocked my 8-year-old daughter, who does not hear that sort of thing. Made her poor little tiny legs run all the way back to our car, which was probably a good kilometre away. Then not broken too many laws getting to Kudos Bank Arena because of double demerits. We race in there to discover that Teenage Jones had finished about a minute ago as we got inside. As we were approaching...
You are the worst dad ever.
Yep. Well, as we were approaching Kudos Bank Arena, I said to her, darling, we might not make it on time. If we don't, how can I make this up to you? And she said, you can put $100 in my bank account. And I said, deal. So I put $100 in her bank account.
Unbelievable.
And
they say
her,
money can't buy you love.
Apparently it can. And I still, of course, owe her tickets to Teenage Jones, but I can't take her to the headline act because even though they're a pair of teenagers, apparently, because they only won Unearthed High on Triple J last year, they are playing at an over 18s gig, which makes perfect sense.
I've got a story rather similar to that from about 10 years ago. It was an even bigger stuff up, but it wasn't actually my fault. But I had this ex-girlfriend of mine who was looking to do a master's degree at Bond University. And anyway, it seemed that they were, doing this open day big thing, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, we were both living in Sydney at the time. And so, she goes, yeah, I'm going to go up to the Gold Coast to check out this open day of theirs. And, would you like to come with me? So I went up with her. We sort of planned to go up for a few days. Anyway, she goes up to the university and turns out they're hosting the open day in Sydney. So we just gone to the Gold Coast.
Oh, my God.
She planned it all. It was nothing to do with me, but it was just hilarious to get there. And they're like, no, actually, we're doing that in Sydney.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
Attention to detail. It's important.
Did you have a great time, though, in the Goldie anyway, then?
It was, I don't know if I'd say I had a great time. I had an interesting experience up there. It was, it's a strange town. It's kind of like, it feels like it's been airlifted from, one of the glitzier parts of LA. Everyone has bleached teeth and, they've got canals and weird things. It's, palm trees everywhere. It's a very strange, it's very unlike any other part of Australia.
Mario, the only other thing that I can think about while you're running with your daughter is that you've been doing so much long distance running that you are streaking ahead of her as well. And the poor little girl's trying to keep up while you stride ahead effortlessly. Were you at least trying to stay with her?
Yes, I'm very aware that she is not the runner that my 5-year-old son is. So he would have been determined to keep up with me every step of the way. Whereas she was doing her best because she wanted to get there for the band. And, that was her first ever concert. Now, mind you, she really, really loved Amy Shark. She only knew a few of her songs at the time, but now she got right into the concert and absolutely loved it. On the topic of my running, also, since we've recorded, I did, of course, complete the marathon that I had planned. And immediately afterwards, in the emotion and the pain and all that sort of stuff, I said, no, definitely never doing it again. Of course, by the next day, I'd already arranged for the next marathon that I was doing because that's how silly people work.
I feel like it's important for me, though, to also tell you a ridiculous story about fucking something up, just so I'm part of the gang. I also was going to go to the Enmore Theatre. I was going to go see the Hives, for anyone who cares. And I was meeting a girl across the road at her house. She also lived on Enmore Road because her mum had a Thai massage parlour on Enmore Road. She told me they also lived where she worked. So I was like, okay. She always pointed it out, so I knew where the Thai place was. And so I went to go to her house, went to the massage parlour, saw that there was a door next door, went up those stairs, knocked on the door. A small 50-year-old Thai lady greeted me. I assumed that was her mum, and I said, hi, is Cindy there? And she said, Cindy, oh, I go and check. And then she went back and checked. I then stepped in and saw that there was a lot of lewd photos all over the reception, which I thought was, of course, unusual to have in someone's house. And then the lady came back and said, yes, I have Cindy. Cindy is ready for you. And I realized that I was obviously in a brothel and that I didn't want to be there and meet Cindy. And so ran down the stairs and called her immediately and said, what the fuck? Why do you live in a brothel? And she said, no, I live behind the massage parlor, not above it. So there's my Enmore story for you, Mario. Now, we did talk about happy endings, and I want to go to Rugby League Christmas, which was, of course, State of Origin. Xander, where did you watch Rugby League Christmas?
So I just did the traditional thing, caught up with a bunch of mates after work and watched it at the pub in the city. And yeah, I think we were all a little bit nervous before the game and probably for about the first 10 to 15 minutes. And yeah, it just went much more pleasantly than I think we all expected. I mean, everyone always sort of talks about how much, like how good we look on paper, but last year they sort of pulled our pants down a little bit. And yeah, I think there's always that nervousness as a New South Welshman that that they could do it again, but it was just with every single try, New South Wales just seemed to be getting more and more in their rhythm. And yeah, I mean, the three fullback system is definitely one I think they're going to hold on to.
Yeah, and I appreciate you tying in my Cindy story with the pulling our pants down analogy as well. It was good. Did are the people that you watched it with, because I'm going to hopefully get to the average punter and who watches rugby league later, but were the people who you went with after work, are they the kind of rugby union loving people that you often bring up with Eamon, or are they general peripheral fans and they just really like State of Origin, or are they quite sturdy rugby league fans?
So I thought of a couple of guys who are very big rugby league fans, but they're also quite big general sports fans.
Right.
They're punters, so they watch everything. Well, one of them in particular is. So he watches everything because he has something riding on everything. So he's a big fan of the NFL, the NBA, the EPL, and even watches Super Rugby and the baseball. So I mean they're all general sports fans, but he's a huge, one of them's a really big Raiders fan, the other one's a somewhat lukewarm Broncos fan, and they watch quite a bit of it.
I think lukewarm Broncos fan is probably the only way you can find any Broncos fan at the moment. Mario, where did you end up watching it, sir?
The Origin. Just before, I just want to reassure that any fellow How I Met Your Mother's fans, that each time that Xander has said general sports fans, I of course saluted and repeated in my head general sports fans. I simply watched it from the comfort of my own home, and with the kids asleep nearby, I tried to keep my yelling and screaming celebrations to a minimum, but I didn't always succeed. I think I woke them both up at least a couple of times because I was rather enjoying the way that game was going, surprisingly enough.
I already heard Xander telling us about how the colour of his jizz, but you must have been absolute paprika level with Tommy Throbovich absolutely having his way with the entire state of Queensland.
I mean, I certainly didn't mind that aspect of it. I was just, each time he'd just do something, of course, just holding my breath. Like, please just don't get injured. That's all I really care about for Tommy, is just don't get injured.
The three fullback thing really did work because Terrell was incredible, Throbovich was incredible, Tedesco incredible. Was that it though, or was it also the halves having an incredible time? But what are you putting it down to, Mario?
Oh, look, both halves were genuinely incredible, and I think, if Latrell and Tommy hadn't been there, then both would have been a genuine shout to be man of the match. They were both so goddamn good. When the same goes for Brian. They were just both amazing, genuinely so. So there's not much else you can say in response to that. The three fullback system works great when two of the fullbacks are Latrell and Tommy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, they're legitimately, Tommy, I think we said on the last episode, Tom Throbovich could easily be the best player in the game. Tedesco is lauded as the best player of the game. Latrell, when firing, is the best player in the game. So it makes a lot of sense. But do you think, you said, what are you going to say? But I really think what you should say is an apology to Tarek Sims.
Tarek Sims had a blinder. I got to admit, I was skeptical of him as well. I think a lot of people were. I thought, Tarek Sims, what has he done so far? But he was close to our best forward. I mean, he was in their face, aggressive, and then putting on great plays too. Like that pass out to Brian Toll, and Mario, it's not very hard to make a glottal stop. I will just put it out there that we should be comfortable with Polynesian names at this point. But yeah, he was unbelievable.
Yeah, Mario.
I should be extremely ashamed, etc.
Now, and also, can you please have a go at Sualawi, because I always fuck it up.
Farmasu.
I'm asking you, Mario.
Farmasu. No, now I've got nothing. I've said it a million times, and now
yes. This is my life. Anytime I'm recording it, I know. Anytime I have to record Tino's name, I fuck it up. I talked over you. Go again.
I said Farmasualawi. No, that doesn't sound right, does it?
No, it doesn't sound right either. I didn't think Tino had a particularly good game. In fact, New South Wales played really well, but there wasn't anyone in Queensland who looked like they were going to turn that around, which is often what their 5'8" does. I'm going to pretend that I'm doing an Eamon quiz when I can't remember people's names. You need to get points. Munster, thanks. I thought he was the kind of guy who's going to, I mean, he normally is the kind of guy who breaks everything apart. Why was he so quiet, Eamon? Xander.
Look, he was quiet because they just were completely shut down in the middle. New South Wales swamped him, put a lot of pressure on him. He didn't get – they weren't breaking the advantage line. New South Wales got pinged 5-1 on ruck infringements. And I think maybe, if we're being charitable and saying that Queensland were just perfect in that area, which I don't think they were, you would say that part of the reason New South Wales got pinged was that our defence was smothering and aggressive the entire time, and they just denied him space. It was simple as that. And you could see he was getting frustrated. He was doing his classic maneuver of kicking guys when they're down, which he pulled out again over the weekend, playing the Warriors when he was winning. Funnily enough, he's well ahead on the scoreboard and still found the opportunity to stick the boot into somebody whilst they were lying prone and helpless on the ground. Just classy bloke.
Now, 86 Geek tweeted, woke up really early this morning about 5:10 a.m. or as it's known in Queensland, 50 to 6. Fantastic tweet. Mario also made sure that I saw it, so Mario, I appreciate that. And Mario Xander very sensibly just brought up the set restart, and you wanted to quickly touch on refereeing during State of Origin.
I just thought it interesting that there was a few high shots that got ignored that certainly were penalties during the round. And there's a few high shots that were certainly sin bins during a regular round that just got a penalty. And, at what point, I mean, they've always done it with Origin, so maybe they can justify it. But surely if the whole point of the crackdown is to avoid the NRL getting sued, well, in Origin, when people are trying harder, pushing harder, and therefore getting more fatigued, are they not more likely to do something that then leads to somebody getting an injury and therefore suing the NRL down the track? I think the way that it was refereed was fine from my point of view, but from the point of view of the whole purpose of the crackdown, I'm confused how they can justify not following those same rules that have been, they've been all about the last, 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, to suddenly just not do them. It just doesn't make sense to me.
You see it the same way as Andy? You see the whistle put away a bit during the Origin game?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with everything that that Marius just said there.
Which is amazing in
time,
itself for normal listeners of the show. That's an amazing statement.
Which is, yeah, it is. But I do think I think the game was also played at a frenetic pace, and generally there actually weren't as many high contacts, but there were a couple really blatant ones. And I thought the late hit, who was it on Latrell, just as he shuffled the ball on to To'o. But it was, that was a sin bin, or potentially a send off back in Magic Round, and we had this lengthy debate about whether or not this was a shocking turn of affairs where, they were just marching everyone left, right, and centre. And I do think that they've undermined their own credibility and their own authority by backpedaling on this. Like Origin was a great spectacle and played at a frenetic pace, regardless of the contact. But I think that they just needed to be consistent and show that they had the stomach to maintain those rules. Like I said, I went through the exact same experience a few years ago when they did this in rugby union. And it's a complex issue, high contact, that isn't just about, the players who are tackling. It's also about the tacklers. But if they're serious, then they have to go after the negligent, dangerous contact.
Mm. And how are you feeling then outside of that in clubland as well, Xander? Are you feeling that it's since Magic Round it's gone down a bit more since then, or?
Yeah, well, it definitely has. I was messaging Aim and I was like, man, it's safe to come back and watch the game again, because we know that he's been frustrated watching it. When I was watching the Roosters game, because Proctor basically coat hanged Joey Manu on the weekend and just copped a penalty. It was like a sin. It was potentially a send off if it's Magic Round, or if it's rugby union. Like they'd probably red card you for that.
Mm.
And then later in the game, sort of rather bizarrely, they then gave Marshke 10 in the bin for a clumsy attack at a kick where he turns his back in the air and he clips the Titans player, with his elbow. And it's a glancing sort of, slight, touch, but there's no intent there. But he went to the bin for 10 minutes. A clear, negligent, dangerous high shot didn't in the first half. It was much more, which had a higher risk profile, I would argue. And then, after that game, we saw the ridiculous sin bin in the Raiders and Broncos game. So it feels like it's been very patchy. Like they've been trying to fine tune it, but they just haven't quite worked out where the balance. On balance, if you go hard and make a statement, you have to hold your nerve and just keep doing it that way until you get the effect you're after. You can't walk back. Otherwise, you just completely cede all your authority to the players and the fans.
Now, Mario, the NRL's been quite famous for coming out hard at particular times and then moving back. But would you say that it's completely moved back, or would you say at the moment that it is just inconsistent with how often people get sent or sent off for these high shots?
I feel like it is edging back. I don't think it's completely back, but I do feel like it's not quite where it was. Maybe that's a good thing. I personally don't think so. I was, as I think I'd said, apart from a couple of the overreaction calls where there was, sin bins for where people fell into them and there's literally nothing a player can do about it. I've been quite happy with the crackdown, and I think it's, been done the right way. So it makes it a really tough one. Do I want them to back off it a little bit and stuff? I just want them to have the line they're going to have and make sure they bloody stick to it is what they really need to do. They've got to stand firm.
Is it coming down to personalities within refereeing? I know a few years ago when they first did the big penalty crackdown where they said anytime you see a penalty, you've got to blow it. And that meant we had games that had huge amounts of penalty counts. And that was, Matt Chechen was famous for doing 23 or something like that over the first half with Melbourne versus Cronulla. And that's because he was a person against that crackdown, saying there's 1,000 penalties. Our job isn't to pull all the penalties. It's to try and actually, by talking to the players and communicating with them. And he said, okay, well, I'll show you what I mean. And then he went out and blew the pee out of the whistle. Is this, again, are we seeing maybe referees' personalities leaking through, Xander, with how this is being played? Or like some of them, could you imagine some of them aren't in favour of this, or some of them are, and so some of them doing it to how PVL wants it and some of them aren't? Is that where the inconsistencies come from?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect like every referee's got a slightly different style and take on these things. I mean, you do have to assume, of course, there is an edict being sent from up on high, the referees' bosses, that gives them direction for these games. But they are all going to have their individual styles. I mean, we've seen Ben Cummins as a very specific style where, he does seem to, I feel he's probably one of the more inconsistent referees in the game, has trouble making his mind up. We benefited from that, I won't lie, but he's had his difficulties over the years. And whereas others, I think are probably more inclined to let the game flow and don't want to blow the whistle as much. So there's an element of that, but that's a job for the referee's boss to try and bring everyone into line, so they have, their form supports their narrative.
Right. Well, I did mention Magic round before, and there is nothing more magical than seeing a player like Brett Morris or Boyd Cordner lifting trophies for New South Wales or Australia. Jake Friend as well, as we know, was a great player and has been put into retirement village in the Roosters have just been susceptible to. In fact, one thing I will say, Gus Gill tweeted was, congratulations to at Sydney Roosters Boyd Cordner on an outstanding career, club, state and country, a real warrior and leader. Even more heartening is the news that he's passed all medical tests and the future prognosis is excellent, which is fantastic news. So how have the Roosters fan base and at large felt with so many leaders and legends having their mouth guard thrown in the bin this season?
I think if you look at the social media reaction, most people are obviously saddened by the number of players who've been forced to retire this year due to injuries, specifically due to head knocks. But I also think that everyone's just really proud of the way the club has managed it, and the fact that they have put the health of these guys like above everything else. There's a really respectable amount of perspective within the leadership at the Roosters that does look at these guys and how the game will impact their entire lives, and doesn't want to just look for a short-term gain just to win a few more games in one particular year. And that was a comment that a few people have sort of made, is that given the amount of injuries they've had, some clubs might have been tempted to bring Boyd back and just ask him, look, can you at least push on this year? But they haven't, and they've let him make this decision. So no, I think the overall response and sentiment has been one of sort of sadness, but also of respect and pride in the way it's been managed.
He during his press conference, I noticed that when asked about what he was most proud of, or a question similar to that, he said that he could call himself a rooster. And it's incredible how emotional and serious that can sound, where completely out of context it sounds ridiculous to say that I can call myself a rooster. It's bordering on comical,
Well,
but anyone inside the rugby league fraternity knows how much that would mean to someone like him, and what an incredible job the club has done to create a culture where that's what someone would say when they're that emotional.
It is incredible for those of us who remember where the team was at in the 90s. When it was, the club was sort of known as the Transatlantic. It was a place where overrated players were bought for more than they were worth, and they kind of stopped through the club and just not performed very well. There was a terrible recruitment policy at the time. We cycled through names to get our to maintain our survival, different models and all kinds of things. And there was a really precarious time there during the Super League War where it wasn't certain the club was going to survive. They considered merging with St George at one point. All kinds of crazy things happened. So to have gone from that to this, the incredible structure that they have in place now, to the point where you've got these sort of one club legends like Boyd, who will say that at the end of their career that nothing makes them prouder of being part of the organisation. Just speaks volumes to the evolution and the amount of work that's been done to make it what it is today.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that period, because really you had premierships essentially every decade, except for from 75 to 2002. So that time there, was a real, a real troubling time for you guys, and to have a club like that pull itself out to a point where now it's been almost unstoppable, or at least up there for the last 30 years, and transition from Freddie Fittler into another dynasty of players. It says a lot. But Mario, you're a sobering figure. How should we really be looking at the Roosters' retirement of all these players? I know that, maybe I don't know. I think that you're a person who also collects football cards, or sometimes you and your kids do. And so I know when I looked at the page this year, 4 of the players that the Roosters have there are retired. It's an incredible time. Is it worth celebrating? Outside of the medical thing, that's lovely the club did this. Are these the kind of players that we should be celebrating, or is this the kind of thing all clubs do and the Roosters just get more media? What's your feeling?
I think it does seem to be more the Roosters do this stuff. I don't know if that is or isn't the case, but and as you say, it could just be the media. But I have always, in the last couple of years, certainly felt like the Roosters deserve to be applauded for that, for the way they handle injuries, but specifically concussions. Other teams have, certainly hung on to players longer than they should have. And who knows, it might turn out that the Roosters hung on to people like Friend and Cordner too long. I really hope it doesn't turn out to be the case with Luke Keary, who's had a bunch of concussions. But that does concern me. But at least you'd think, surely the right medical people are looking and are helping make that decision. And, I think for the sake of the NRL and for the Roosters, you'd hope that they've made him sign off 1,000,000 times on he's agreeing to continue playing and that sort of thing, because, if it goes wrong, because of course the best medical people in the world, to my very limited understanding of how CTE works, is it's absolutely impossible to diagnose until they're dead, basically. And
fuck, yeah, right.
We don't want these guys to have to be dead and then find out, holy shit, look at that.
Yeah, and I'm not a fancy doctor, but that was just a Screaming Eagles thing for you. Oh, fuck, Mario. So I was hoping you would like that. Okay, I'm going to move off that unless there's some other, heartwarming tributes, Andy, you wanted to give to those fallen players.
No, I think I've waxed lyrical long enough, and I'm probably going to make the non-Roosters fans listening to the podcast a little sick if I go on any longer.
Okay, so I asked the punters how much league they watch, and they got back to us. Now I want you to first of all have a guess where you are, but I don't want you to tell me your watching rate yet, because I have a I have a great selection of people I want you to kind of align yourself to. So I asked, do you watch all 8 NRL games, watch a few games per round, just watch your team, don't watch much NRL at all? Mario, which one do you think got the most amount of percentages-ness?
I would guess that most people are watching 2 to 3 games a week tops.
Okay, so you think the most amount was in that one? And Xander, what are you vibing?
Yeah, no, I'd assume the same. I mean, there'd be some people who just watch their team. All 8 is for very serious people, and I would say probably serious gamblers. But most people don't have, like most people don't have 16 hours over the weekend just to watch them.
Well, obviously, Xander was talking about his own experiences because his friends are all massive gamblers and watch all sports, and so that's why he thinks anyone who would watch all 8 is a massive gambler. And I sincerely hope that if you are, that you're getting help. No, look, you'd be surprised. Mario, you were both right. Watching a few games per round was 48%, but very closely behind that was 38% was watching all 8 games.
Wow.
And then,
Interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. Now,
when I started doing the podcast, I went from watching probably 4 or 5 of the games, trying to watch all 8 games, just because I felt like I needed to make sure I had something to talk about when we were doing the rundown. But up until then, it's a big time given. I was pissing my wife off, so I imagine there's a home life component of it. Is kind of where I get it.
Yes. Now, without giving away too much more, I now want you legends to. There were so many people who got into the threads detailing their response, which is so nice of them. There was a range, which I just grabbed the best ones, and I want you to work out where you think is most like you, which one best describes you. So, on one end of the scale was at GT351_Johns. He says, "Only my team and nothing else. No Origin, no finals, no grand final, unless my team is there, which won't be for a while. So I guess I'll have a lot of free weekends." Now that's an amazing response. No Origin.
Look, if you've ever been unfortunate enough to follow GT351_Johns, the guy, his love for the Bulldogs is only surpassed by his hatred for the Sharks. So the fact that he doesn't hate watching the Sharks game is a surprise to me. But the rest of it, nah, not a surprise. That guy is as obsessed Bulldogs fan as you would ever find anywhere in the whole world, I would think. He's crazy.
I'm not expecting you to respond to all of them, but Xander, you did have something you wanted to quickly say about GT.
I just find it interesting that anybody would hate Origin. Like, there's a few people, I've seen here and there that see it as an insult to the international game, and I kind of understand that a little bit. But it's just such a spectacle. I know Kiwi rugby fans and that who'll tune into Origin just because it's such a big spectacle.
So the next one is at Shins81. He said, it depends on what we've got on plan for that weekend and who is playing. I would say on average between 4 to 6. And the next one is at Beerboy182. Every game, but probably 6 of them the next day on a 20-minute mini without knowing the score. Only my own team in full live, or maybe some top 4 clashes in a pub. Now, that one got a lot of dittos or things. Even this friend of the pod, Giannis _Mateus, also grabbed that one. At to Mr. Hettig then said, before JDB returned, I watched every game. Now every game except the Dragons. Have you heard much about that with people completely boycotting Dragons games?
No, I must admit I haven't heard about them boycotting Dragons games. I guess I can understand it from who they hired as coach, but still.
Yeah. And then last one, a Cuntio. He said, I tune in for all 8 games, so I pay more attention to it than others. So out of those 5 or so, which one do you think you're most like, Xander? Do you think you're like a Cuntio, Mr. Hectic, Beer Boy, No Shins, or GT351_Johns?
I'd say at the moment I'm probably falling into the category. I can't remember which name was assigned to which, but the category of I watch all games, but sometimes apart from my team, I'll probably watch a few of them on delay or as minis the next day.
At Beer Boy,
probably try and watch most of them live, but I won't always get to watch them, so I'll do them the next morning or something.
Mario?
I'm probably in between a Cuntio and Beer Boy. On a good weekend where I've got not much to do, I will watch, say 5-6 games live. But on a normal weekend, I'm probably, this weekend I didn't watch a single game live. I watched the Manly one on delay later because I wasn't able to when it was on because I was, visiting people and stuff. And for obvious reasons, I spent most of my weekend driving. So it wasn't one of those weekends where I had the opportunities to watch all the games. But on a normal weekend, I'm watching probably 5-6 games, I think.
Now, I also love, for anyone who's not on Twitter, I strongly encourage you to get on. It's not, social media is not about place. You need to follow the right people. And Mario and I would know intimately 4 out of those 5 people that I just listed. Xander quite sensibly mentioned that he restricts his social media use in a day, which is very sensible. But have you met, I know that you've met everyone else there, I think, Mario, but at NoShins81, do you know at NoShins at all?
No, I don't.
Yeah, neither did I. Well, I know him on Twitter, but I haven't met him, unlike Beer Boy or Mr. Hectic or at Acuntio. Okay, well, gentlemen, unless there's anything else, I think I might wrap this up.
Longest part of the episode was my story about myself.
So one final thing I suppose we should probably cover off on is after 50-6 thumping in their own home turf, probably their most home turf game they've ever played.
Oh, well said.
Braithwaite Astor went on and called it, it was essentially like a home game, which was not accurate because it was played in the most, northern part of Queensland, the furthest and most difficult for any New South Welshman to get to. So it's orders of magnitude more a home game, not essentially one. But anyway, I'm being pedantic. After that, where do you go as Queensland? They're gonna come back. There's a lot of talk about the resurgence and all the rest of it, but how do you shut down? There's been a lot of talk about trying to shut down Turbo. They put too much effort on Turbo, then they're not putting that much. They're not putting that much attention on Latrell and Tedesco. So how do they come back from this? Where do we see them going in game 2?
Mario, you go first, sir.
I see them going straight to hell, which is where they deserve to be. They're not going to win. Get over it. I mean, we said that last year, and then we all know what happened. But they don't have Wayne this year. They've got an absolute clown of a coach who's been proven to be the complete fraud that he is. Right off Queensland, right off Origin, it's over. They'll be calling for it to be over within the next couple of years because we're not losing for a while.
Now, Xander, did that cut out for you, or is it just for me?
It cut out for me too. But
okay, great. Well, obviously it was Zoom. Well, obviously it was Zoom. Just hearing Mario and going, we don't need to hear this drivel. You're talking about, I'm assuming, without even knowing, I'm assuming you said something about they don't have a great coaching staff and so they'll die.
Basically so, yes.
Yeah, great. Well, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I can only see the scoreline getting bigger, and I can't wait for a 60-6 win next week. I also feel, Xander, that you may have given yourself away as the @shitbraith says person who runs that account with your, real knowledge of what he says and how poorly he says it. So maybe you're limiting your social media just on your own account, not so much on other accounts.
No, I'm really more just a silent admirer of that account, and I did. It was funny actually. I posted that reflection, and it was immediately retweeted and added at the @shitbraith says account.
Yeah, so, there is a real pitchfork and torch community out there on Twitter that loves roasting Braith at any opportunity.
I got to say, I hope they never fire him because it's like him and MG. They're just an endless source of joy when it comes to mixed metaphors and ridiculous gaffes in commentary.
Well, thanks again, Mario and Xander. And until next episode, do what Mario does whenever he has a bad bake and cut off the edges.
I guess when I really reflect on the comedic value of the sitcom Family Ties, I think the thing that really gets forgotten is the comedic brilliance of Michael Gross.